When do I use weapon? Well, this is kind of an open-ended statement. To the person that was asking me, they said, hey, I'm pretty aggressively new, and I just kind of don't know when to use something. So with the caveat that there are going to be rocket nerfs coming, at the moment, rockets are the most accurate weapon in terms of maneuverability things. Now the rocket change, the animation change, is going to make it more like torpedoes, so it'll be less responsive per se. But in general, how do rockets work? Well, rockets are going to be approaching a broadside situation. So you're going to be coming in from one of these angles. So first off, what does a broadside situation do? Broadside means if you've got multiple ships that are sailing probably in a direction because there's going to be some kind of threat, that you can come in on a broadside and you can attack an outer edge ship. Rather than being somewhat in the middle of the situation, you can attack from the edges. We're going to notice that this also affects torpedoes. So HE rockets are going to typically be used, again, from this outer edge situation, to deal small amounts of consistent damage. So let's do this. Make 24 small consistent damage. Now right now this is pretty accurate, and that small consistent damage, because it's high explosive, it is going to be pen reliant. We're going to put here pen reliant, and it looks terrible next to this actual spelling, but it just calls more attention to it. So why is this important? Because if you're in a British ship, the HE off of the British rockets is going to shatter a lot. This means that if you're trying to attack heavy cruisers or you're trying to attack things that are up tiered, you may not get good damage at all. But because it's high explosive, you might shatter some AA mounts, you might get some stuff done, you might set a fire. So in general, it's going to be small, consistent damage. AP, on the other, is actually different. AP demands accuracy, but high damage reward. We can change that, make that you to do, and or we'll put that there. We'll even change the color so it kind of looks different. So it demands accuracy, but it has a high damage reward. So once again, we're coming in from the outside, meaning if, for instance, this outer piece here might be a Des Moines, or this piece might be a Moskva, something that has something like a cruiser that we can citadel by shooting rockets into the cruiser level armor, which is not going to be strong enough to shrug off the rockets. Battleships will, but cruisers will not in general. If we've got the ability to kind of pick at something on the outside, as long as we can get a nice straight hit, you know, we have the ability to interact and do high amounts of damage. So in general, rockets are going to be against very maneuverable targets because they're consistent damage if they're high explosive. AP is not about highly maneuverable targets as much as it is about making sure that you get the exact approach angle, a 90-degree angle that's going to bury in citadels. AP rockets are more complex than this, and if you want to learn more, there are videos that specifically go over AP rocket mechanics. But in general, if you are trying to pick at the outside of a situation, if you are trying to get consistent damage on something, or if you have a target that can give you a high damage reward, then you'd be using your AP rockets. Torpedoes. There are two types here. There's fast and there's slow. In general, fast is going to be used for harass. Now, what does that mean? So the Germans are going to have very, very fast, very accurate torpedoes. So you could be striking at a destroyer and actually hit them, or you could be striking with your 3 torpedo group or whatever, causing the DD to veer off, to avoid, to try to tightly deal with this. It's not about dealing damage to the destroyer so much as it is crowd controlling him, causing him to have to deal with what you're doing and respond to it. Or harassing, for instance, a larger ship. You might have a Stalingrad or a Moskva that if you land these 3 torps in, it's going to deal some damage. Not a lot of damage, but some damage. Similarly, the Hakuryu, which is going to have much more damage, almost twice what the German Torps are. If you have a Moskva in this instance, the Moskva is going to have to maneuver. It's going to have to somehow veer. It doesn't necessarily have to cut a 90-degree turn unless it really just wants to avoid all the damage, but it is going to have to respond somehow. And it's going to have some displacement to it, but in the vein of harass, you will be doing chip damage, chip, chip away at this. In clan battles, Venezias are used against very fast Hakuryu Torps, and they do hit. Not all of them hit, but some of them do, and the damage sticks. Slow Torps are for displacement. Actually, let me go ahead and just actually type that where it doesn't look terrible. Slow Torps are for displacement and threat. So slow Torps, like the Hakuryu, or no, sorry, the Midway, to an extent the FDR, and also the British, are going to be for displacement threat. This means that if you're attacking a Moskva, it's not so much about dealing damage to it, it's about forcing them to move, to relocate. Now, harassing something like a Venezia or a Moskva means that it's going to have to move back and forth, but it's going to, for the most part, stay in its position. Unless it's critically low health and it cannot take any more health and it has to move, well, then it can usually take one torp here, one torp there, and continue on through. Not to say that Hakuryu is not a huge threat. It is, but it's typically survivable in small doses. However, the slow torps, the audacious torps have very high chance for floods for CVs. It's not very good, but still. And also they can accurately be aimed at a place on the hull. However, they're going to take a long time to get there. So for instance, if these torps are aimed at the nose of the hull, that's a very high flood chance because they will converge in on that nose, which would force the ship to move, force the ship to maneuver. And if you have, for instance, a Midway that's going to see a ship and it's going to have a 6 torpedo drop, that ship does not want to sit there and eat all 6 torpedoes. It's going to want to move. So what can this be used for? If there is a cap that's under contest by a radar ship, you might drop in front of the radar ship where your friendly destroyer might be in this direction and try to cause them to reverse to give your destroyer some breathing room. Of course, damage is great too. If they sit there and they take the damage because they cannot turn or maneuver, then all the better. But in general, because they are slow, you would expect them to be either outplayed or outmaneuvered to some extent. Skip bombs. What are skip bombs for? Skip bombs are for sieging. I'm probably not spelling that right. Chat, if you know how to spell that, you could definitely let me know. Sieging and semi-accurate threat. What does this mean? Well, before we go on, once again, I do want to point out, as with the rockets, you can torp in from the edges. So if you've got a fleet of ships, you can come in on the edge and you can torp. You can come in on the edge and you can torp. You can't necessarily fly through to torp. You could, but that's very aggressive. But once again, rockets are going to chisel from the outside of the pack. Torpedoes are going to chisel onto the outside of the pack. That's part of the reason to use them, and they do have a heal at higher tiers, tier 8 and tier 10. But, okay, good, it's right. Woot! So sieging semi-accurate threat, what does that mean? Once again, it is broadside, so we'll use yet another color for skip bombs, which are going to have 3 lines, and they're going to come in from that direction. Again, you are coming from the outside vector from the group of ships. You're not flying over them, you're not flying on top of them, you're sieging from the outside. A sieging threat means that if you have a ship, and you can start your attack run at 8 kilometers away, that as your planes come in, they can drop from 4.5 kilometers out, skip line, hit. You're going to deal damage, and at that 4.5, they can turn out and leave. Basically, they'll touch about 3.2, which is almost outside of mid-range. Some ships have mid-range out to 3.5 or 4 kilometers, but you're taking extremely low amounts of damage, so you're attacking with 4 planes, and you might be losing 1, which is a huge exchange rate. So if you're able to drop, spin out, come back, drop, spin out, come back, drop, over and over and over again, skip bombs have high regeneration rates because they have very low health. When used in a sieging manner, you can deliver extreme amounts of damage with very little resource loss, which means you have the ability to continue sieging out damage. However, it does require this 8-kilometer buildup time, which is pretty significant. Semi-accurate threat. What does that mean? It means that if you cannot deal with this 8-kilometer thing, you can come in closer. You could drop from 3 kilometers away. You could drop from 1 kilometer away, because there are skips to the skip bomb. So you could actually drop when you're directly on top of the ship, as you might do with a destroyer or a highly maneuverable cruiser, or somebody that's using islands for cover, for instance. If there's an island over here that's blocking, you can fly over the island, but that forces you into close range. And you have to remember that if you are going to go into close range, you are going to be in the significant AA aura of that ship, and you will lose planes. Skip bombers have very low health. They will melt. The ship that uses skip bombs at the moment, the Immelmann, regens about 1 per minute. But if you lose 6 on a single strike, that's 6 minutes before you get those planes back. So a semi-accurate threat, the closer you are, theoretically the bombs are going to be a little more accurate in the sense that you could drop them more responsively to the target's movement. But as soon as you start getting close, you start losing planes. So there's a value, but also a loss to the situation. Bombs, HE and AP. These are not broadside, and that's very important to remember. So in this case, you may have a ship such as this, and as you're coming in, let's actually go ahead and change that, and we'll make this go sideways just for the length of this demonstration. When you consider AA threat, you've got short range, you've got medium range, and you've got long range. Now, with the broadside threats, you will be going through long range to medium and dropping as you touch into short. With the bombing threats, you will be going directly over the ship and often lingering. HE bombs such as the Midway, HE bombs, the Lowenhart, the Midway, Japanese bombs, yeah, so HE and AP bombs all linger except for the carpet bombing mechanic of the British line. That's a slight variation in terms, but the rest of them are going to come in, breach through the long range, breach through the mid, breach through the short, and then begin their animation in the short range, which means you're taking long and medium and short range damage in a focused frenzy during the time that you're aiming until you finally make the drop. Then a slingshot will take you out, which will negate damage at least at that point. But the fact that you'll be hovering for many seconds over the top of your target means that your dive bombers will be taking a severe amount of punish. British don't necessarily have this interaction. Also, the FDR mimics the British in what it does, and that it doesn't do a dive bombing run, it just sort of flies forward and drops. But the reason why this is extremely important, if we go back to our example all the way up here that we've just savaged with stuff on top of stuff on top of stuff. If we look at this example, we have those 3 ships that are together. If you're going to come in and you're going to bomb this ship right here, you're going to hover in its short range, potentially the short range of this ship, and potentially the medium range of this ship, and you'll be hovering there for multiple seconds at a time before you drop. Same thing here. Medium to short, short range to medium, as well as the ship's AA. If you're coming in from the side, you're going to be shot by this ship and some long range stuff from the others, but that's it. When you bomb and you linger in close proximity, you take a severe amount of damage. Bombs have a problem with fighting in packs or attacking a pack. It can be used as a last resort. It can breach. You'll take some losses. You'll get the job done, but the amount of losses you take can be prohibitive. So that's something that you have to factor in. As far as HE bombs versus AP, typically you bomb what you can hit. AP bombs are going to be used where they can yield citadels. For the Japanese line, that's primarily cruisers, although some battleships. For the German line, that's primarily battleships, although some cruisers. And then high explosive bombs are used for the rest of the other lines, in which case all you really do is want to hit. You don't have to hit specifically, you don't have to hit magically, you just have to hit. It might do damage, it might not, it might set a fire, it might not, but you have to hit the target. The biggest thing is when you're choosing a weapon, partially it's going to be about damage. Partially, if it hits, it's going to do damage. Skip bombs primarily about damage. Bombs primarily about damage. Torpedoes are kind of about positional interaction and coming in from a broadside against a group. Rockets are for chip damage, although AP rockets are really supposed to get some serious return for what they do. But again, coming in from an outside into a group. So these are for outer edge stragglers, because you're trying to interact with something all the way from this broadside. And then this is for actual damage interactions where you're going to be losing planes if you're going to try to get on top of something to do the thing.